Ladies and gentlemen, recorded in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada, it's time for Fight Night Picks with your host, Craig and Matt Allen.
And welcome to another Fight Night Picks preview for the full card. We have a great card coming up, Matt. This weekend, Thiago Santos taking on Glover Teixeira in the main event. And Matt, a little bit of a different look because normally we're just getting right into the first prelim. But hey, we're not doing some of these cards. Just full justice with these shows. Exactly. They've been blowing up. So A, we really appreciate everybody for tuning in. Help us out with the subs and the likes. The channel's grown immensely since the start of the year. We were barely over 1,000 subscribers at the start. Trending upwards to 20,000 by the end of this year, and that's amazing, and it's all thanks to everybody out there. So, A, we really do want to give thanks and credit where credit's due to the awesome viewers out there, and I mean, you guys bring it every single week. We're doing our best out here. Matt, we've had an incredible run the last 2 weeks. I mean, 2 weeks ago, we had that tie. You had that Da Un Jung fight against Sam Alvey, but Matt, you had a clean sweep, 11-0, and then last week with 10-1.
Wow.
And I went 10-1 and then 8-3, and that's not too shabby either, but it's second place on the year. Matt, we're having a pretty good one too. So I'm really looking forward to it. And like I said, this card is definitely a banger, and it's another one of those fight night cards where there's a lot of fights that might fly under the radar, and I mean, we'll talk about them moving forward. Obviously, we're going to break down every single one of them individually with those individual videos dropping later on this Thursday, so make sure you catch those. Maybe you're somebody that doesn't like to watch the whole bit of them. Maybe that's just you. I don't know, but we've got a lot of good ones. I mean, I'm looking forward to Marcus Rogerio de Lima and Alexandr Romanov, the rebooking a fight that was due to us just last month. That one fell out. We get it here. Heinisch Barcelos taking on Khalid Taha. That's a short notice one. Taha's opponent out. In steps a former RFA champ in Barcelos. So Matt, overall, really good card. I know there's a lot of things that you're looking forward to, but as far as like under the radar matchups, we have plenty of them. What's one that you're really looking forward to?
So it's not that under the radar because it is on the main card and it does have a ranked fighter, but Ian Heinisch versus Brendan Allen is as good of a fight as you're going to find on this whole card.
Well, time out, Matt. Let's get into the fight of the night screen because for me, that's one of those ones. And if we're talking fight of the night for this card, Ian Heinisch, Brendan Allen, I mean, there's bad blood. Both these guys, former LFA middleweight champs. You know that they're going to want to go out there. There's a built-in storyline here. This fight was supposed to happen earlier on this year. And man, these two guys just don't like each other.
No, they don't. And not only with that added bad blood, but right now in the middleweight division, there's just this big overlap of talent. You have a lot of new guys rising up. And both guys, if you put on a crazy exciting fight and get a wild finish, like you're going to get you're going to get your name into, the top contenders, and you're going to start fighting the Paulo Costas of the division. There's really exciting matchups going forward. So the winner of this fight has one of the brighter futures at middleweight.
And Matt, I really like it. I mean, you've got Ian Heinisch, who definitely is a decent wrestler. He's lost to some decent grapplers so far in his UFC tenure. And Brendan Allen is not an easy test in this fight. For me, the other one, and it sucks, you're cherry picking here a little bit, but Thiago Santos, Glover Teixeira, there's definitely an opportunity that this either lands as a fight of the night or as a performance bonus for one of these guys. What are you looking forward to in this one?
Just the fact that we're actually going to finally get this fight. It seems like this fight's been rumored forever, really ever since Thiago Santos moved up to 205 pounds. And you know what you're going to get when Thiago Santos fights. I mean, look at the Jimmy Manuwa fight. Look at the Jan Blachowicz fight. When he lands on your chin, he puts you to sleep. And whether you thought he did or did not beat John Jones, it was the best fight ever. But he's a middleweight who tore both of his ACLs, who fought John Jones to a split decision. So I know he's got a few holes in his game. The wrestling's not great. He's been finished by the likes of Eric Spicely on the ground, so maybe Glover can take advantage of some of that stuff. But I do think this is a phenomenal fight. Both guys have bricks in their hands, and it's probably going to be an extremely wild finish.
And straight up, what a kick in the dick for both of these guys. The fact that the UFC announced that Jan Blachowicz is going to be taking on Israel Adesanya in a fight, to me, that seems like, hey, here's a bit of a lobball to Israel Adesanya. It definitely isn't, but it feels like that's the way the promotion's going, and it really sucks for both these guys. You have a main event that it seeds you in the division, but it doesn't give you a title opportunity. But other than that, Matt, this is a great card. I'm really looking forward to it. And I mean, hey, there's probably going to be a couple fights added because so far we just have 10 with the loss of Gustavo Lopez and Felipe Claras. Also a bit of an odd one with the fact that I see Sarah Morris and Vanessa Mello listed on this card in a couple of different places, but it has been more or less debunked by Combate just last week, the fact that that fight is now going to be taking place in January. So it'll be interesting to see what's added, and if fights are added to this card, hey, we'll have an opportunity to talk about them later on in the week with the individual videos, and if there's something that's so late notice that we don't get an opportunity, you can check out Fight Night Picks !Kicks on Saturday. It's our live show, so hey, maybe this is the first time you've tuned in with us. A, we appreciate you. But B, on Saturdays, we do have a live show where we get to kind of take into account everything that's happened during the week, the weigh-ins, maybe something crazy happened on Saturday. So we get an opportunity to really go over things once more. And I mean, Matt, a few other housekeeping notes. You can always find us on Twitter and Instagram at Fight Night Picks. You can find me at Craig Allen FNP. You can find Matt at Matt Allen FNP. And oh, by the way, Matt, most people didn't know this, and I don't know how. We're brothers. Doesn't that seem crazy? People thought we were just good friends, but no, we're brothers.
I mean, we're that too, but also brothers.
But apart from all that, I mean, doing a new show and a new preview to get into these cards, I mean, A, I'm really looking forward to it, but B, if you've been along for this journey for quite some time, we're going to be looking at adding more and more content to the network. So stay tuned for that. I know a lot of people checked out Early Stoppage this past week where I teased it a little bit, the fact that we had a lightweight tournament. But yeah, make sure you check out those. We'll be adding podcasts. We'll be adding more stuff, getting deeper into the recap shows as well. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt. It's a really exciting time to be a fight fan. We want to thank you for joining in. We're going to kick off this series with Max Griffin taking on Ramiz Brahimaj in the welterweight division. So let's get into it. Really looking forward to this fight between Max Payne Griffin and Ramiz Brahimaj at 170 pounds. And a lot of people might not be familiar with the fighter to our right-hand side. And Ramiz Brahimaj, he was supposed to make his UFC debut back in June against Takashi Sato. Unfortunately, Brahimaj out of that fight because he had a cornerman that tested positive for COVID-19. It ended up Ramiz Brahimaj contracted COVID-19 over the summer after the fact. Now that delayed his UFC debut a little bit more, and he was supposed to be on Contender Series in 2019 against Miguel Baeza, and a really weird story, and if you want to kind of get into the weeds on that one, he had a great interview with our pal JHK MMA with SCMP, and he described it perfectly, and it's a sad story really, because Ramiz Brahimaj, he was kind of going through those pre-fight tests, and they found a tumor behind one of his eyes, so of course, he scratched from that fight, and that was on a card that had Baeza got a win, gets into the UFC. There were a lot of really good fighters on that card, so it would have been a good springboard. But for Ramiz Brahimaj, I mean, practice makes perfect, I guess, and he gets an opportunity this much later. Now, I mean, he's had wild camps. He's been getting ready for a lot of different opponents, but he definitely has a good gym to lean on in Fortis MMA. Saif Saud really putting out some great prospects. And I mean, you don't have to look any further than Max Griffin's second to last fight, where we saw one of Ramiz Brahimaj's teammates and Alex Morono taking on Griffin. I remember when Saif Saud, you get the corner cam, then he goes something like, I think the call was 11-2. Morono goes 1-2 high kick, and it rocks Max Griffin so hard. And we've seen it from Saif Saud. I mean, you had it in the main event last weekend, Anderson Silva against Uriah Hall. Worked out pretty good for Uriah Hall having Saif Saud in his corner. So Ramiz Brahimaj, I mean, 8-2, all 8 of those wins by submission. He's a jiu-jitsu brown belt. He's competed and medaled at Worlds in Jiu-Jitsu, so you definitely know that he has that strength with him. But also, again, the training partners he have at the gym. I mean, we can go through them on and on and on. But Fortis MMA slowly becoming one of the biggest gyms in the world at turning out great prospects. So Ramiz Brahimaj definitely going to get done on the ground. Max Griffin, Matt, if we could really describe him in one word, I would say difficult.
So Max Griffin is a really unique case because he's one of these fighters who, when he's walking out, the commentary team's going to be talking about, oh, his boxing is absurd. He's got really nice hands. Going to remind you of a Calvin Kattar, perhaps. And then you watch all of his fights, and he shoots for a lot of takedowns and does have a lot of clinch control. And it's really weird that always the talking point around Max Griffin is his boxing. And let's be honest, he does have good boxing. We saw that in the Mike Perry fight, and I think that's an important fight to bring up because Mike Perry, yes, he's, known for his crazy antics and whatnot, but if he catches you clean on the chin, you're going to go to sleep. And Max Griffin was just able to fight a really smart fight, move out of the way of those big looping shots, and really use his boxing effectively, find his shots down the middle. He was able to drop and really just beat the brakes off poor Mike Perry in that one. For Brahimaj, this is an interesting fight because I would say Takashi Sato does everything Max Griffin does, but a little bit better. I don't think he wrestles offensively as good as Max Griffin, but I would say his striking is much more developed. It's much more dynamic. He has a much more developed kicking game as well, because with Griffin, you really have to focus on his boxing, which again is very good, and then his wrestling. But other than that, he's not going to go out there throw a ton of kicks. He is starting to incorporate more and more. He has started using more leg kicks, but it's still not nearly enough of his game, and that's something that's always going to worry me, because at the welterweight division, you have to think, Vicente Luque is barely in the top 15, and let's say you have to fight him at some point. He's going to kick your front leg 75 times, and if you don't have an answer to that, whether it be a check or a leg kick of your own, I think that's really going to it worries me at least going forward in his career. And on the streak that he's on, listen, he's 1-4 in his last 5. You think if there's ever a time to pull out a new trick or a new wrinkle in your game, it would be right now. So hopefully we do see something a little different from Max Griffin, but this is a really great opportunity for Brahimaj, because if Max Griffin is having trouble on the feet, he will start to shoot for takedowns himself, and then that can create a lot of scrambles that could be beneficial for Brahimaj.
It seems like every Max Griffin fight you watch, you're right. They talk about his boxing, and he gets rocked. And then he comes back after getting rocked. It's like it just kind of shakes the cobwebs out of his head, and you better hope that somebody doesn't finish Max Griffin. You make a really good point. Now, I made a mistake last week, and I'll own up to it. You look at the fight between Miles Johns and Kevin Natividad. It was the first fight on the card. And I was really hard on Miles Johns because in his UFC and Dana White's Contender Series fights, he hadn't thrown a leg kick, which was insane. Now, he threw a couple against Kevin Natividad, but it was that great uppercut that finished the fight for him. You look at Max Griffin in his last 4 fights, the most, by percentage, the most leg kicks he threw was in that Morono fight. They amounted to 12% of his total strikes. Other than that, we're talking under 10% of his total strikes are from leg kicks. And if you watch him fight, he moves side to side very well. He has a really wide stance too, so a lot of wrestlers would have a hard time trying to take down Max Griffin because he's so wide. You see guys going and they reach for that lead leg. They go for a single. Max Griffin can stuff the head and push them down, get clinched up against the cage, and then switch position on them. The one thing that he doesn't do well, though, when he does that, and I mean, it's almost flawless the way he does it every time, except for this one part. When he gets him flipped around, he stays in that clinch. He has a lot more success when he pushes off and gets back in range and starts boxing again, but he rarely does it. He'll keep it clinched up. Maybe he'll work for a takedown of its own. But you look at Max Griffin, and I mean, the trouble for me, and we've talked about this before this video, Matt, you look at some of the losses. Chidi and Joe Kawani, hey man, LFA champ now. Colby Covington, Eliseo Zaleski, Curtis Millender, Alves, Morono, Oliveira. The problem for me, 1-4 in his last 5. Not to say that those fights aren't close. The Thiago Alves fight, you could argue it either way. The Morono fight, I mean, he won a round in that fight. And the Alex Oliveira fight, yeah, it was a split decision loss. To me, I had scored at round 1 for Griffin, rounds 2 and 3 for Oliveira. It was weird the way that the judges scored the 3rd round for Griffin. He ended the round on top, but he was only there for about a minute and a half and didn't land a whole lot. He had that terrible cut above his eyebrow. Yeah. So for me, Max Griffin, I know exactly what I'm going to get. I'm going to get some pretty good boxing. He doesn't land a ton of combinations with a lot more single shots than anything. Coming out of Team Alpha Male, he cross-trains between gyms, but we see him over on the Instagrams spending a lot of time at Team Alpha Male. Has quite a few teammates on this card as well. Darren Elkins taking on Eduardo Garagorri. And on the right-hand side, again, Ramiz Brahimaj. It's not that his striking isn't great. You can see him there with the hybrid boxing gloves on, but he's mostly well-known for his jiu-jitsu. Can you get Max Griffin down? Can you submit him? Sure, you could, but we really haven't seen it. He's only been submitted once in his career. If we have a look at the odds, Matt, Max Griffin, a slight favorite, or I would say a slight. He opened up the minus 195 favorite. The money's been coming in on Brahimaj, and right now, Max Griffin minus 163 on best fight odds. For Ramiz Brahimaj, open to plus 160. He's now at a plus 135. If we look over on Tapology for the total votes so far, 713 votes, 73%. Going with Max Griffin, 84% predicting him to get the win by decision. I think, you look at the Tapology votes, you look at the odds. I'm in agreement with both of them. It doesn't have to do with just those. That's not the influence there. But again, I know what I'm going to get out of Max Griffin. His last win was over Zalim Mamadiev, who definitely wasn't UFC caliber. The guy got the piss kicked out of him every single time they carted the poor guy out. Had a great record over in Russia, not so much in the UFC. But with Max Griffin, again, with the volume and the defensive wrestling, those are the things that I really like. And if I have a look at Max Griffin's overall body of work, if you want a total 66% takedown defense, 55% accuracy, those are halfway decent. And I mean, as far as the striking metrics, a negative strike differential just by a bit. But Max Griffin likes to get into wars. If Ramiz Brahimaj can kind of withstand the pressure and really work the submissions from the ground, the guy's slippery, we've seen it, but I think that he's going to have a hard time adjusting to Max Griffin and his pace.
I agree. I really can't break it down better. I do think the pace of Max Griffin is going to be a really big problem for Ramiz Brahimaj, and I do think it comes down to the wrestling defense of Max Griffin. And up until this point in the UFC, I know they talk about his boxing all the time, but his wrestling defense, and really just his wrestling in general, has been one of the more surprising parts of his game. So, I mean, Colby Covington took him down, but that's really been the only guy. So,
and Mike Perry.
Yeah, and Colby Covington's going to do that. Mike Perry, he's pretty okay. So I do think Max Griffin, he'll probably be able to get the win. I do think cardio is really going to be the key to this fight. If he does show up in kind of regular Max Griffin, have that sort of steady output in the first round, just get your rhythm and sort of ramp it up as the fight goes on, you should be able to get it done.
And I mean, if not, Max Griffin could be on the chopping block, 1-4 in his last 5, Matt. We're really looking forward to this fight. We both have Max Griffin, but a great opportunity for Fortis MMA's Ramiz Brahimaj. With a win, hey, you're setting yourself up pretty well. So we're really looking forward to this card. We've got a great main event between Thiago Santos and Glover Teixeira. You're going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt, as we always say. Let's get into it. This fight is just a weird bucket of muscles. We got Darren the Damage Elkins. He's MMA Sandman taking on Eduardo Garagorri. And I had to say that because Darren Elkins normally wears it in every single one of his fights. You'd think that he smashed beer cans over his head before every one of them. He's very red and normally gets even more red as the fight goes on. And also he has that repulsive tattoo on his chest. And with Eduardo Garagorri, this is a fighter that came into the UFC out of Uruguay, and he made his debut in Uruguay against Humberto Bandenay that ended up winning the Copa Combate. He lost the title to Rafa Garcia in his last fight, but all that to say that Humberto Bandenay no longer in the UFC. Garagorri picks up a big win there in his UFC debut. All 3 judges scoring at 30-27. Everybody on MMA decision scoring at 30-27 for Garagorri. And then what does he do, or what does he get in his next fight? Well, he gets Ricardo Ramos, a guy that could spinning wheel kick anyone and knock out a horse at that. Now, Matt, that fight didn't go well for him. He got submitted. And what do we know about him? I mean, he's 13-0, primarily most of his fights on the lower or regional scene. They were all finishes. He was a guy that was highly touted coming in. He had 6 submission wins, 4 knockouts. What can I say? He's a guy that was beating scrubs on the regional scene. His last 2 wins were over debuting fighters. So doesn't really tell you a whole lot as to what you were going to get. He was also a favorite in his fight against Bandenay, which I found to be a bit of a surprise. And he was supposed to take on Andre Harrison a while ago before he made his UFC debut back at PFL. He was also supposed to take on Mirsad Bektik this past year. That fight fell out. Bektik ended up losing his fight. So in steps Garagorri taking on Darren Elkins. And Matt, Darren Elkins is a guy that's really been around the block for as long as MMA's been around, really. I mean, he's been a team alpha male staple with the Chad Mendez's, the Uriah Fabers of the world. But right now, Darren Elkins is on one of the worst streaks of his career. And he was coming off of one of the best streaks in his career. It looked like a resurgence of Darren Elkins to a point. Now he's lost the 4. And if we go into that losing streak, Matt, we're talking about really good fighters. Your champ Volkanovski, Ricardo Lamas, Ryan Hall, and then Nate Landwehr. And that was a tough fight. If you're a big fan of the Damage, you probably didn't like that fight against Nate Landwehr. And really, you got like for like. You got a couple of decent wrestlers, guys that can toss hands, guys that have probably gotten into fights in bars before. You got that, and Elkins did not come out the winner. So this fight, a bit of an odd one matchup-wise. What do you make of it?
I think the UFC wants Darren Elkins to win this one. I don't know why. It's just that Darren Elkins is on this weird streak, but when you look at the level of competition that he's fought, other than Landwehr, okay, Volkanovski, no shame in losing to him. Now, Volkanovski did beat the absolute bejesus out of Darren Elkins, to be completely fair, but he at least made it to the last bell. He landed a body kick or 2, and that was great. The Lamas fight was weird just because he could never really seem to get going in that one. And again, there's not many people whose nicknames really just perfectly fit not only the persona, but the athlete themselves. And Darren Elkins, the damage, and it's really in your face because of that tattoo, but he gets hit with a jab. If they turn the AC on in the arena, it could open up some scar tissue. That's the one thing that worries me, because Darren Elkins is in the category of like a Nate Diaz, where every time they fight and I even see a little bit of blood on them, I'm like, please don't stop this fight just yet. Because you know that, yes, they're probably going to be fine if they do continue. I'm not a doctor or anything, but they are MMA fighters after all. And it's just, it's this weird thing that it is always going to come up and be a problem. And I think in the Landwehr fight, that was the first fight that I did realize, like, oh, this scar tissue is kind of getting out of hand, because Landwehr would hit him with anything. It could be a jab, it could be a straight right, it could be a knee, and it would just start cutting and cutting and cutting Darren Elkins to where at the end of that fight, he was just covered in his own blood. Now, he did put up a good fight in that one. I thought Landwehr fought a good fight, all things considered, but Darren Elkins didn't look completely shot, is what I'm trying to say. It wasn't like he's at a point in his career to where BJ Penn is, where he's just eating a bunch of damage and he can't really give anything back. Darren Elkins is still there to win fights. I wouldn't say that, other than the Volkanovski one, because again, it was just so one-sided, but he's still there to win these fights. I don't think that they're just throwing a body into the octagon who has a name. Like, I think Darren Elkins is a guy who some casuals might know who he is, the hardcores appreciate him for what he is, and against Eduardo Garagorri's game plans in this fight are either going to have to be, you're going to have to outlast Darren Elkins, which is a very difficult thing to do, because Darren Elkins does two things extremely well: cut and have good cardio. So you're either going to have to out-cardio Darren Elkins, you're going to have to make your wrestling somewhat of a threat, and I really don't see that happening in this one, or you're going to have to be able to use your striking enough to then open up the takedown. And other than that last one, I really don't see how Eduardo Garagorri can... He could finish Elkins, he could catch him with a big shot, but I really don't see him consistently out-skilling Darren Elkins for 15 minutes.
And I mean, you look at Darren Elkins, it's not that long ago where he's on a 6-fight win streak over Robert Whiteford, Chaz Skelly, Godofredo Pepe, my favorite name in MMA. He took the O from Mirsad Bektik. He beat Dennis Bermudez. Dennis Bermudez, pretty good wrestler. And Michael Johnson, I mean, that was a huge win too, because he finished him in that one. So you look at all those wins, and then you parlay that with the Volkanovski, Lamas, Ryan Hall. I mean, those fights are going to happen. Nobody wants to fight Ryan Hall. Nobody. No. But DVD manufacturers, maybe. Great instructionals. But then you look at the Landwehr fight, and that's a bit of a tough one. So if we want to have a look at the odds in this one, Matt, I'm not overly surprised where they're at. I mean, Darren Elkins is a pretty big favorite, open to -225. Some money did come in on Garagorri, but at this point, Elkins -232 over on best fight odds. For Garagorri, open to +190. He's at a +186. If we have a look at the total votes over on Tapology, at a 712 votes, 68% going with Elkins, 83% by decision. I would say, again, and it's a bit of a, somebody served it up on a tee and I'm just going to hit it. To me, the method of victory for Darren Elkins in this one is a boring decision. I mean, Elkins takes Garagorri down, gets on top, goes from half guard to full guard to half guard. He plays the Jake Shields game. I think that's how you beat Eduardo Garagorri in this one. I mean, yes, you could have Garagorri fishing for submissions. We did see that on the regional scene. But to me, he hasn't been the most impressive fighter in the UFC the two times we've seen him out. And I think they wrote him a death wish to face Mirsad Bektik. I know how crazy that sounds, because Bektik definitely didn't win his last time out.
Hasn't looked good in a while.
No. But in this fight, it feels like Elkins' fight to lose.
I mean, I agree with some of what you said. I agree. Darren Elkins by decision, the safe pick. He's not a terribly big finisher. He doesn't have crazy punching power. He doesn't have an absurd output or wicked submission game, but he's just kind of average at everything. I will disagree with how the fight's going to go. Darren Elkins doesn't have boring fights. He's not just going to take you down and go from full guard to half guard, rinse and repeat Jake Shields style. He's going to take some shots. He's going to make it a fun one. It is going to be back and forth, and he's going to give Garagorri moments in this fight. It's one of the big problems about Darren Elkins, and why when he does fight those elite of the elite, he can't get away with some of this stuff, because you can march forward and eat shots against these guys who aren't ranked. And then you fight an Alexandr Volkanovski, and it's like, oh, so he can defend my takedowns. And when I do throw all my weird techniques, he just moves out of the way and hits me and counters me. So Elkins is going to give away moments in this fight, and he's going to make this fight closer than it should be, but he still will get the win.
Matt, we're both going with Darren Elkins somewhat reluctantly. To me, this is a huge pass. Elkins is too much of a favorite in this one, but I'm really looking forward to it. We've got a great card coming up, headlined by Thiago Santos and Glover Teixeira, so you're going to want to keep it locked in for that, Matt. As we always say with Fight Night Picks, let's get into it. Really looking forward to this fight between a couple of unranked heavyweights. We have Alexandr King Kong Romanov taking on Marcus Rogerio de Lima. And Matt, we already previewed this fight just about a month ago. This fight was originally scheduled back in September in what would have been Alexandr Romanov's UFC debut. Marcus Rogerio de Lima out of that fight because he tested positive for COVID. So Alexandr Romanov fought Guam's Roque Martinez in a fight that we were really excited for. I mean, Roque Martinez, former, I wanted to say Pride, but Ryzen veteran, and he fought a lot of good names on the regional scene. He was kind of an exciting guy to see because decent grappling, really good striking, explosive fighter at heavyweight, a little bit of flub on him, but he makes fights very interesting. Alexandr Romanov, to me, he had a long layoff. It was a fight where I know in the original prediction video, if you go back and watch it, I was pretty critical of him because he had the USADA issues. He couldn't make his UFC debut for a while. He had been off since his last fight for a long, extended period of time. I mean, I can tell you, it was a year and 8 months, really, between fights. So that will weigh on you. Alexandr Romanov, to me, is like Vitaly Minakov 2.0. This guy is the most exciting heavyweight I might have ever seen in my entire life as a prospect. And hey, big Cyril Gane guy here. I think he's a future champ, but Alexandr Romanov is like a close second. Sergey Pavlovich is pretty interesting too, but Alexandr Romanov, he throws front kicks. He keeps his hands incredibly low. He goes palm to palm and goes for German suplexes. I mean, what can this guy not do, Matt?
Pretty much nothing, really. He's like Kurt Angle, but in an octagon. It's pretty wicked. He's just doing ankle picks and belly-to-belly suplexes. And the fact that he still has enough energy afterwards to do them to his coach post-fight press conference is still really impressive. Let's be honest, this fight's not going to be competitive in the slightest. I'm a Marcus Rogerio de Lima fan. I do think he offers kind of an interesting look at the heavyweight division because he's very compact for the division. Of course, former 205er. Got submitted very famously by Ovince St. Preux by the St. Preux choke. But he has phenomenal leg kicks, really good overhand punches. But this is what I'm going to go back to, and I think we can sum this fight up very easily. He got submitted by Stefan Struve. And he got taken down and submitted by Stefan Struve. And I do think Stefan Struve, on the ground at least, is a phenomenal grappler. But his wrestling's not the best part of his game. It's probably one of the weaker parts of his game, along with his chin. But Alexandr Romanov is going to completely exploit that problem. If you're getting taken down by Stefan Struve, Romanov's going to throw you through the air. And we're going to see a lot of those big King Kong hammer fists. Because it's not like Rogerio de Lima has this extensive jiu-jitsu background, or you see it in his fights at least, to where you have to worry about him throwing up, triangle chokes off of his back. From what we've seen in the UFC, he has a hard time getting back up to his feet. His cardio's not exceptional, and against a guy like Romanov, who is going to be picking you up, making you go to the ground, you're going to be forcing his weight back up. You're just going to be fighting against him constantly for every inch. I think this is just tailor-made stylistically, at least, for Romanov to just run away with a victory.
Again, if you want to go back and watch the original prediction video when this fight was supposed to happen, it's not unlisted. It's still out there. You can catch it. I picked Marcus Rogerio de Lima, and the reasons why were the layoff for Romanov, the fact that, like you said, Marcus Rogerio de Lima, definitely the more accredited striker. You see him coming forward, tie stance, he throws nice kicks, he can whip a head kick in there, he can spin, he can do all kinds of stuff. Things that you don't see at a lot of 35-year-old heavyweights. But that's another problem. Marcus Rogerio de Lima, no spring chicken, a lot of miles on the old odometer. He's a smaller heavyweight, too, and I know you can see it up there. He last weighed in 257. He's only 6'1". He's a pudgy guy. He's a pudgy guy at heavyweight, and his cardio doesn't carry. Now, does it for Alexandr Romanov? Well, I haven't really seen too many issues in any of his fights. Again, perfect record so far, and he looked amazing against Roque Martinez. I do also see it that way, Matt. Again, the layoff wasn't a big issue in the fight against Martinez, and if we have a look at the odds in this one, I'm slightly surprised, but not so much. I mean, Romanov opened to minus 300. He's now minus 314. You look at Marcus Rogerio de Lima, open plus 250. He's still around a plus 250. If we have a look over on Tapology to 750 total votes, 94% have Romanov. 43% saying by submission, 44% saying by knockout. I think this is a Romanov win inside the decision as well. And I don't think that's a wild thing to say. I mean, this guy is one of the most explosive athletes that we've seen. And really, if you're not overly familiar with Vitaly Minakov, go back and look at some of the similarities. You want to see a fight that's similar to the Romanov-Martinez fight? Go watch Vitaly Minakov when he fought our pal, Tim Johnson, over in Bellator. Potential future title challenger, Tim Johnson. Maybe. Probably won't happen, but maybe. But I mean, yeah. Alexandr Romanov, what can I not say? I'll look like a total idiot on Sunday morning if Marcus Rogerio de Lima wins, but I don't feel feel that.
So I'm bringing something back because I've had 2 pretty good weeks. Alexandr Romanov's my lock of the week. I never thought I'd say this again. He's probably getting head kicked now.
Big favorite.
Yeah, I'm really sorry for putting that out in the universe, but I'm going to say Alexandr Romanov, my lock of the week. Just stylistically, this is a nightmare for Lima. Hopefully he does have a few answers to the wrestling and the pressure of Romanov, but I just don't see it.
I mean, the last thing that I want to say, Alexandr Romanov, you're coming out of a smaller gym with Lion Comrade, but really has a good relationship with the coach that he decided to suplex after his last win. And he's trained at the Performance Institute. He's kept in shape. He is in really good shape. You saw him training with John Jones before his last fight. That's pretty good. And for Marcus Rogerio de Lima, coming out of American Top Team, man, I pumped the tires of Rodrigo Nascimento when he fought Chris Dawkins, and that didn't work out. And then you got Arlovski fighting on this card in the co-main against Tanner Boser. American Top Team heavyweights these days. Yikes. Felipe Lins, yikes. Yeah, there's a lot of yikes. But yeah, I have this win for Alexandr Romanov. You're also going with Romanov. We've got a great card. Like I said, Arlovski, Boser up near the top. You also have a great main event between Thiago Santos, American Top Team, and Glover Teixeira. So keep locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt, as we always say. Let's get into it. Really interesting fight at 185 pounds. We have Houston, Texas, Trevin Giles taking on the extraordinary gentleman Bevon Lewis. And it's interesting because these guys have very contrasting sets of styles. You look at them, I mean, height and reach wise, all of those accolades or metrics kind of fall the way of Bevon Lewis. He's a big guy. He's a power puncher. Trevin Giles, not one of the bigger guys at 185. You saw that in his last fight against James Krause. And he's one of those guys that if he's going to win a fight, he's got to really incorporate every single element of mixed martial arts. He's one of those new gen type of fighters because he can take it to the mat, he can land volume, and I mean, when he's winning, he's beating some really good fighters. I mean, Antonio Braga Neto. Where you at, Antonio? I wish you were fighting more. I know there were rumors that he was coming back. But you look at some of the other ones. Ike Villanueva that ended up in the UFC. Beat him in Legacy. He beat Ryan Spann as well on the regional scene. And so far in the UFC, you look at the 2 losses and they're tough. I mean, Gerald Meerschaert, forget about the Hamzat Chimaev fight. Other than that, Gerald Meerschaert, pretty good. Great guy at Rufus Sport. And Zach Cummins, that was a tough one. The thing for me with Trevin Giles is as long as he can stay on his bike, his cardio is not terrible. And if he can do that, he should be able to have a good night out. Now, for Bevon Lewis, Matt, like I said, totally different type of style. Bigger guy, longer guy for the division. You saw everything work his way in his last time out against Daquan Townsend where he picked up a big win. But apart from that, I mean, the fight against Uriah Hall, it went well until it didn't. He was having some good success in the first 2 rounds, got finished in third. And then the fight against Darren Stewart. Darren Stewart's a tough guy to fight. He really is. I mean, ask Kevin Holland. Nice split decision win, but still. Darren Stewart is a tough guy. Ask Edmund Shabazian as well. So for Bevon Lewis, he's training out of one of the best gyms that you can out of Jackson Wink. You get to train with such guys as the John Jones of the world. So there's always that. And I mean, hey, Phil Hawes was there for a bit, and look how that worked out for him coming out of Sanford MMA. But in this fight, it's a really tough one to try and break down and to try and preview because these guys, I think things might start to cancel each other out.
I do agree. And when you look at both guys, they're just so well-rounded that we don't really know what phase of the fight we're going to see. Because this fight really could be contested 100% on the ground for 15 minutes. They could be clinching for 15 minutes, or they could just be striking for 15 minutes. Now, Bevon Lewis is a very weird case because he doesn't have a crazy high output, but he does have pretty good power. So it's like he just frustrates his opponent, where he lands a power shot, he'll be sound defensively, and then just kind of rinse and repeat. It's a very Yoel Romero-esque way of striking. And it's been able to work for him in some portions of his fights. Go back to the Darren Stewart fight, though. It's almost like both guys were kind of hesitant about their opponent's power, so no one really threw anything. And in the Uriah Hall fight, he was doing well up until Uriah Hall basically just flatlined him with an uppercut that was pretty wild. So you look at that, and it's like, okay, well, I probably won 2 rounds off Uriah Hall, so did a 45-year-old Anderson Silva, and I lost to Darren Stewart. But then against Daquan Townsend, he did look decent. I know his cardio completely fell off in that 3rd round. And Townsend, I hate to say it, but he probably was never really a UFC caliber guy. So you have 2 losses and a win over a guy who I don't really consider to be in that upper echelon. Whereas Trevin Giles, yes, he's a little bit undersized, but I would argue that at least his resume is a little bit more filled than Bevon Lewis.
The other thing, too, about Bevon Lewis's fight against Daquan Townsend, if you really want the backstory, Daquan Townsend had a fight a week before that. Took the fight against Bevon Lewis on short notice, and to be 100% exact, So he fought Bevon Lewis. I guess I made a mistake. He fought Bevon Lewis, and then right after that, he fought Devin Clark. So roles reversed. So he lost that fight at 185, and then he went on to fight at 205 like a week later. So it was just a weird set of circumstances. So for Bevon Lewis, confidence builder, but that was way back in January of this year. And for Trevin Giles, it's a little bit of a weird circumstance for him too, because he beat James Krause in a fight that everybody will argue tooth and nail about whether or not Trevin Giles won it. It's got a W next to his name. I don't want to get into that discussion.
Not this house.
But we already brought up a name in Kevin Holland. Trevin Giles was supposed to make the walk against Kevin Holland, and he fainted backstage. Now, whatever caused it, I mean, we could look it up. We could go in the MMA fightings of the world, but it doesn't really play into this one. It's been a while. He's had the chance to recover from whatever spell that was, and now he's ready for this fight. And like you said, complete martial artist. His jiu-jitsu is a little lacking. His wrestling's all right, but we've at least seen him throw takedowns. For Bevon Lewis, 100% takedown defense so far with his limited sample size in the UFC. His striking differential not too bad. Throws more for output. Takes a little bit more. The defense is 6% better for Trevin Giles. Now we're just kind of nitpicking here a little bit. But overall, it is a tough one to try and predict. So before we get into the odds, before we get into the Tapology picks, Matt, how do you see this one going?
I gotta be honest, this is not gonna be your fight of the night, really at all. Like, when we go through the card, kind of looking at like, oh wow, that's the one I'm excited for, that's the one I'm excited for. This one did not come to mind in the slightest, because Trevin Giles isn't a guy who's gonna go out there and really wow you with some crazy techniques or anything. And Bevon Lewis, again, he's just got a frustrating style, because I do think if he upped his output and kind of trusted his own cardio a little bit more, he'd have so much more success. Because when you look at kind of the way he picks his single shots, if he was just able to kind of get a rhythm and start matching those together, I think he'd be much more successful in the UFC. Now, it's very easy for me to say, of course. I'm not the one fighting Uriah Hall, but you can tell that there's the foundation of a very high-level striker there. I would just like to see him up the output. I think it's a winnable fight for Bevon Lewis. I think he could knock out Trevin Giles, but ultimately, I am going to pick Trevin Giles. I think the cardio is definitely there. He is going to be able to mix it up with his wrestling a little bit more than Lewis will, because with Lewis, he's not even going to threaten that takedown to give you a look. Giles will mix in his wrestling with his striking, and then try to take your back, and then just kind of mix it up and keep you thinking the whole time. So for MMA IQ and for cardio, I got to go with Trevin Giles.
Yeah, and it just to really hammer it home. It's a tough one. And you look at it, Trevin Giles opened a minus 115 favorite. That line dropped really quick. You get to about a minus 155, and then it clocked back up for Lewis. At this point, Giles minus 108. For Lewis, he is a minus 115. It's pretty much pick 'em odds. If you have a look over on Tapology to the total votes, 707, 69% going with Trevin Giles, 75% saying he's going to win by decision, which is in agreement with what you're saying, Matt. Again, Bevon Lewis, if he's going to get the win, I would think he's got to get out to a hot start.
I would think so.
Really get moving quick. So if you're on Giles, I think the way to go, probably take the over on a Trevin Giles win. And for Bevon Lewis, maybe you want to take the under. If you're hot on either side, for me, it's a really tough one to try and pick. I am in agreement with you for Trevin Giles. Again, the fight IQ, the prior resume, and the fact that he can really bring everything together, I think that's going to be the ultimate sign in this fight. If you see Trevin Giles really picking up a pace or really staying on a pace steady in the first round, it's going to be Giles all day. Maybe you get him at a decent live prop after the first round. But I'm really looking forward to this one, Matt. It is a tough one to try and go with. I'm going Trevin Giles. You're going Trevin Giles. Looking forward to this card. We got a great main event. Thiago Santos taking on Glover Teixeira. 5-rounder means nothing in the title picture, so it's just for fun. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt, as we're always saying.
Let's get into it.
Really interesting fight that just seemed to come together all of a sudden between Giga Chikadze, representing Kings MMA, taking on Jamey Simmons, the Afro Samurai. And Matt, for the Afro Samurai, just signed a 4-fight deal with the UFC, getting the call up to take on a guy in Giga Chikadze that's absolutely rolling right now. I mean, it's been a while since he's lost a fight. It was the Austin Springer fight back on Contender Series, and it was one where this guy is such a good kickboxer. We know him from his time with Glory, and he was really searching and fishing for submissions in that fight. He ended up getting finished, went back to the drawing board, and the real knock against Giga Chikadze that we had going into his last fight against Omar Morales was he doesn't throw much for volume. He's really a cerebral fighter. He's picking his shots. In that fight against Omar Morales, he threw all that out the window and put on a perfect performance, really. I mean, he looked amazing. Morales coming down from 55. I changed my pick later on in the week with question mark kicks. I went with Morales. Matt, you had Morales. But originally I had Chikadze. Otherwise, I mean, you looked at that fight, he looked amazing. He really did. It was a perfect performance by Chikadze, and he's a big guy for 145 pounds. Well, he's taking on Jamey Simmons. You might find Simmons listed as James Krause Simmons, not to be confused with the James Krause from Glory Fitness and MMA. And you look at Jamey Simmons coming out of Pure Vita, BJJ, and MMA. You got a lot of really good training partners there. I know Ode Osborne's one of them, Zach Otto as well. There's a lot of good fighters coming out of that gym that you might not really think of. And for Jamey Simmons, his base in wrestling coming out of the University of Wisconsin's Stevens Point. That's it. And he wrestled in college at 157 and 149 pounds. He's a small guy. You might see him listed as 5'6" on some websites and 5'5" on some others. Not a big guy. But he reminds me of one fighter in particular, and this is going to sound really weird. He reminds me of Frankie Edgar because he's not a big guy, but he fights up in the bigger weight classes. In his MMA career, he's fought at lightweight, he's fought at featherweight, and he's fought at bantamweight. He's knocking guys out. You go back and watch his last fight, and I mean, yeah, he fought Morgan Sickinger at Pure FC 16. Now, this was back almost a year ago. Hits him with a straight right, rocks him, follows it up. And the other thing, and the reason why there's that comparison for me to Frankie Edgar, is you go back and watch a lot of his fights, and he will rely on his wrestling background, but it's not like when he gets rocked. It's not to a fault. His wrestling in MMA is actually really good. He'll take guys down. He'll chain together takedowns. He'll land some nice ground and pound. You want to see another fight? The Terrence Allman fight. It's a weird one because Allman maybe breaks his thumb in the first round, but they keep going. Jamey Simmons, to me, was one of those regional guys that definitely deserved to call up. I mean, maybe you'll disagree with me if you watch his fight at LFA 70 where he gets knocked out and submitted in 13 seconds. Go watch that one. It's weird. All of this to say, Matt, this is way too big of a step up. Like, I would think Jamey Simmons would get a shot on Contender Series against, like, a decent fighter, not against Giga Chikadze. It seems weird.
Yeah, it is a really weird matchmaking because Giga Chikadze is a guy who I think we're more high on him than a lot of people are, even though we didn't pick him to win his last fight. But after the Omar Morales fight, like, that's a legitimate UFC win. You can say a lot of his other fights have, oddly, either he's been come in on short notice or his opponent's been switched on short notice. And that was one of the first fights where it's been like full camp Chikadze. And I'm not saying that's one of the new mythical figures of MMA, but who knows? Maybe it will be. For poor Jamey Simmons, though, you go from fighting, regional level talent, and if you do kind of do a bit of a dissection on his record, even the last opponent who he fought, who was 20-12, I believe at the time, if you actually watch him, he doesn't fight like a 20-12 fighter. You can tell the record's very deceiving. So for Jamey Simmons, I like the bare bones of his MMA game. He's a good wrestler. He has good striking. He has good submission game. He does a lot of positive things. But the problem is you're feeding him to a guy who can do everything he does and kind of has the counter to a lot of what Jamey Simmons does. I really like the counter knees and striking of Chikadze when other people go for takedowns. He's really good at... You can tell that he's had to adopt his striking a little bit for MMA just to defend the takedown as well, because he fights with his hands much lower. He fights in sort of not a crouch stance, but you can tell his center of gravity is much lower, and he's great at throwing knees right up the middle. And to bring up, like you had mentioned at LFA 70, when Jamey Simmons while he shoots in for a takedown, holds his hands way too far out, gets kneed in the head, and then goes down almost immediately. Giga Chikadze kind of has made his whole MMA career off doing that. He's great at punishing you for your takedown attempts, beating you up on the feet. And at distance, Jamey Simmons hasn't fought anyone with nearly the level of striking that Chikadze has. So if he is able to start teeing off with those light kicks, if he starts going to the body, by the end of the fight is really going to be wearing on Jamey Simmons. And I'm not saying Chikadze by finish, because it's too much for prediction, but Chikadze is a massive favorite. It's hard to fight him on a full camp. I really doubt that a blue chip prospect's going to come in and just beat him on a week's notice.
That's it. Like, I don't like... So if this fight goes the way that the prediction goes, so let's say Jamey Simmons loses this fight, what do you do? Like, you can't go back to Contender Series, so you have to find somebody that's in the UFC. It's just a weird job of matchmaking. Giga Chikadze is on a win streak, like we mentioned. He's won 6 in a row. The UFC wins. Again, Brandon Davis, he won by split. He beats Jamal Emmers by split. Those were arguable fights. He beats Erwin Rivera, who came up from 35 on short notice and got beat up, but gave a decent account of himself. And then he beat Omar Morales and beat him fairly soundly. And then you look at the two names that he was supposed to face. He was supposed to face Mike Davis, and that fell out. Mike Davis, I wish you could fight in 2020. He's my low-key, like, you got to watch this guy type of fighter. And he's supposed to fight Alex Caceres at one point before the Morales fight. Like, those are some recognizable names. For Jamey Simmons, he was supposed to take on John DeJesus back at the start of the year. That fight fell out because the entire card fell out because of the way of the world. And then he's supposed to take on Sean West at Caged Aggression 28. back about a month ago. But again, he signed with the UFC. So if we have a look at the odds, they're limited. This fight was just announced in the last couple of days. Chikadze opened a minus 485 favorite, minus 490 at this point. Simmons opened a plus 350, now at a plus 379. If we have a look at the total votes on Tapology, 96% of 649 votes going with Chikadze, 62% saying he's going to win by knockout. Again, I like what Jamey Simmons has, and if Simmons can really work the takedowns, who knows? He could go out there and get a win. I don't think that that's crazy to say. For me, this is a push. I don't have Chikadze as anything like a lock, anything like that at all. This is a fight that I would stay away from, and I think there's a lot of upside with Jamey Simmons. I'm probably one of the few people in the world that's selling him this much.
I was just say, you've been popping his tires.
I'm looking forward to this debut. I just think it's a very winnable fight for Giga Chikadze. He's fought a lot of fighters similar to this. Again, the Austin Springer fight, he lost. He had moments in that fight, and again, you talk about those strikes straight up the middle. Front kicks, knees, the straight, just straight hands. I mean, there's a lot of things that he can do, and a lot of things that he can do to counter Jamey Simmons' game. So I think Simmons is just a little bit too early here. If he picks up a win, that's the other trouble. You beat Giga Chikadze, you're way up there. So it's just a weird bit of matchmaking for me. I have this one for Chikadze. How do you see this one?
Yeah, Chikadze all day. Like I said, I'd favor him against most people in the top, maybe not top 20, but those top 30 to 25 to even, anyone outside the top 15, basically. Giga Chikadze is either going to give them a competitive fight or beat them. So coming in on a week's notice, yeah, it's too much too soon for poor Jamey Simmons. Well, Chikadze probably by finish.
A good opportunity for Jamey Simmons, but we both have Giga Chikadze in this fight. I'm really looking forward to this card. We have a great main event. You have Thiago Santos taking on Glover Teixeira. Are Santos' legs back in full form? Well, we'll find out. Really looking forward to this card. Keep locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt, as we always say.
Let's get into it.
Really interesting fight. Well, I'd say one of the most, but the most dynamic division in women's MMA right now at strawweight. We have Claudia Gadelha taking on Xiaonan. And I'm really excited about this one because Claudia Gadelha, for what it's worth, has been in the division's elite for a really long time, and she's faced the toughest of competition. We can go back through her record, but if you want to look at the last five, Andrade, Esparza, former champ, Ansarov, Marcos, and Hill. And I mean, Randa Marcos, you win some, you lose some Randa Marcos. It's just how it goes. But Claudia Gadelha has been at the top of the heat for a really long time. She's at 31 right now, and you can say what you want. The Esparza fight, I thought Esparza won. The fight against Angela Hill, maybe thought Angela Hill won that fight. Her opposite, Xiaonan, has been winning fights convincingly since she's joined the UFC. And again, for her, the level of competition, you really scratch your head. I mean, you look at the fights that she had outside of the UFC, we're talking binary. 2-1, 1-1, debuting fighters. It really didn't give you a good idea of what Xiaonan was going to bring into the UFC. She beats Kaylin Curran. All right, you beat somebody that's 4-5. She beats Viviane Pereira, who didn't really have a good run in the UFC. She beats Yuri Kondo, no longer in the UFC. And then she beats Angela Hill, and then she puts a beatdown on Karolina Kowalkiewicz. And for Xiaonan, that was a coming out party. She beat her convincingly, 30-26s across the board. She looked amazing. And for Xiaonan, her wrestling's good, but her striking is great. I mean, her striking so far in the UFC has been amazing, especially from distance. That's what makes this fight very interesting. What do you make of this one?
So Xiaonan is going to be doing something this whole fight that Claudia Gadelha is not great at dealing with, and that is distance striking. We saw that a lot in the Angela Hill fight. When Hill was on the outside, throwing, pumping that jab, moving around a lot, using a lot of her side-to-side movement, it gives Claudia trouble because she's not the most accurate of strikers, and she can find herself kind of chasing if you do start to move a lot. That happened in the Joanna fight where she'll kind of try to throw those big Jessica Andrade type hooks, and it can get her caught at some points. And against Jan, I'm really worried about her closing that distance because I think it's safe to say Gadelha is better on the ground, just straight jiu-jitsu wise. You're not going to get an argument from me there. In wrestling, I would argue they are somewhat closer in that respect, just because the wrestling defense of Xiaonan is phenomenal. It's really going to come down to what version of Claudia are we going to get. And I am famous for not knowing how or if she's going to win a fight. Every time I say she's going to win, guess what happens? She doesn't. And every time I say she's going to lose, she looks phenomenal. The Randa Marcos fight, I feel, is a really pivotal fight in her career because that was the first fight where
Which sounds crazy.
It really is, but because she had already fought for titles and whatnot, but it was the most important part of, I would say, her post-title UFC career because the women's strawweight division and this is going to sound so heartless, but I really believe it. Come at me. You guys know what my Twitter is. I think Claudia's kind of over it. I do think the division's moved past her, and I do think that when you do have a new division, there's going to be those top fives, and then once new talent starts coming into the division, and the division finally settles into where it's going to be, some of those top fives are going to get flushed out, and we saw it with Karolina Kowalkiewicz. She was beating everyone. She was this really fun Muay Thai striker. People thought she could go up against Joanna. They have similar styles. They're both Polish. Oh my god, it's perfect. And then you see her go up against Joanna, and you're like, ugh. Was she that good? And then she just starts losing to all these other kind of up-and-comers on their way up. And not to say Claudia is going to be the next Karolina. She's going to go on a big, long losing streak and then get married. But Yan Xiaonan's not the person you really want to risk this with. If Claudia goes out there with that low-volume kind of style that she had with the Randa Marcos fight, where she's waiting for her opponent, just trying to counter with a big punch, Yan's volume is really going to add up. And I do think... I'm not going to say TKO, because for women's strawweight, it is really hard to predict, but I do think the accumulative damage is really going to wear down on Claudia.
And the really interesting thing here, and you have to take it with a grain of salt, and you've seen that last week and then this week with the added graphics that we have in here. I'm throwing in those stats, and you see it, the strike differentials, that's one of the fun things that I've taken strikes landed per minute, minus strikes absorbed per minute. That's how you get the number. But you look at Siri Kondo, or the Siri Kondo fight. That's a perfect example. And the fight against Karolina Kowalkiewicz. That's where you have Yan Xiaonan just adding to those totals and really starting to show that strikes landed per minute at 6.72 is amazing, especially for this division. And it dwarfs Claudia Gadelha's number by about 3 per minute, which is insane. She has better striking accuracy and better striking defense. But again, take that all with a grain of salt, because Claudia Gadelha has been fighting the best of the best for quite some time. Yan Xiaonan's on that slow burn up to the top, and I like that. I know this is one of those Drake Riggs type of prospects that he's definitely high on. And if Drake Riggs is high on a fighter, then you should definitely pay attention
100%.
to them. And Yan Xiaonan's one of those fighters. And again, her takedown accuracy and defense, 75% and 70% defense for Yan Xiaonan. Now, for Claudia Gadelha, her numbers, takedowns average per 15, 3.13. That's great, especially for this division.
100%.
Who else are you going to get that from?
Suarez,
but not many other fighters, exactly. And her accuracy at 45% and her defense 58%. That's kind of like benchmark for this division. Yan Xiaonan's is way above that. Now, I would expect that as she faces the Claudia Gadelhas and the higher end talent, the numbers are probably going to go down a little bit. But in this fight, it makes it really interesting. And if you look at the odds for this one, I'm a little surprised where they're at, because for Yan Xiaonan, open to plus 110. She's now at a minus 125. The biggest mover and shaker so far on this card at a 27% line movement for your fighter, the former title challenger, Claudia Gadelha, open to minus 130, now at a plus 100. So if we have a look at the total votes over on Tapology, at a 766 votes, 65% going with Yan Xiaonan, 91% of those voters saying that she's going to win by decision. Again, I find all that interesting because name value-wise, on the left-hand side, you have the name value of Claudia Gadelha. This is a tough one because, again, I've got it as she's training out of Nick Cantone MMA, which is really, with Mark Henry and crew. And there's a lot of great training partners there as far as wrestlers are concerned. I just don't know if Claudia Gadelha's striking game has evolved to the point where she can get a win over Yan Xiaonan at this point in her career.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And another thing that you always have to talk about when you talk about Claudia and her fighting style is her cardio. And yes, she's been in a lot of 5-round fights, but she's one of the odd fighters who, normally if you're in a lot of 5-round fights, your style just gets a little bit more efficient as you do it. You just realize, okay, my fights are 10 minutes longer, take a little bit off my shots, I'm going to have to fight for longer. It's like she has a punch count in fights where she can throw 100 punches, but the second she hits that limit, she gets tired.
She's on that Blake Snell level.
Exactly. So, she has to get to that level, and she's...
Or Kevin Cash is pulling you out and you're losing the World Series.
Exactly. Couldn't have described it better myself. So, I do worry about that, especially with a striker like Yan Xiaonan. If she is getting to you early in the fight, and if you do start to chase her, that card is going to get worse and worse and worse. And as this fight drags on, it's just going to keep on favoring Yan more. So, yeah, I'm going to say Yan Xiaonan. I'm not going to say finish, but I wouldn't be surprised if it happens.
Now, let's kind of switch this on its head a little bit. If Claudia Gadelha is going to go out there and get a win against Yan Xiaonan, and again, we've talked about the adversity that she's faced, there hasn't been a whole lot, really, so far in her UFC tenure. How is Claudia Gadelha going to implement her game plan to get a win over Yan Xiaonan that's been so dynamic in her UFC career?
If I was Claudia, I'd just fight like Damian Maia. I don't know why she didn't decide to do that when she first came into the UFC, because Go back to UFC 212, for instance, when she did fight Karolina Kowalkiewicz, when they were two, still at the top of the division. She took her down, choked her out in the first round. And it was like, oh, wow. Like, if you have that in your back pocket, Claudia Gadelha is not that great of a striker. Like, she's okay. It's just her striking is quite basic. She doesn't do a lot of crazy things. Like, when you watch Weili and Joanna fight, you're like, wow, those are things I'd never be able to do ever. When you watch Claudia fight, it is sort of the striking fundamentals, and she just add in her takedown game with it. But if I was her, shoot for those takedowns early and often, try to get top position as fast as you can, really make the fight wear on Xiaonan, because you know that your cardio is probably not at her level, so do everything you can to just wear on her, make her feel the weight that you have, and yeah, just try to force this fight into the deeper waters. I know you would think that's a little bit counterintuitive, but I do think if she has a grappling heavy game plan, her being Claudia, I do think she can have a little bit of success in this. Again, though, I'm picking Xiaonan because I don't think Claudia Gadelha can do those things. I do think the distance striking, I think the cardio and the footwork's really going to give Claudia problems, and hopefully the Claudia Gadelha's curse has been broken off my fight predictions.
Matt, I'm really looking forward to this fight. We both have Xiaonan to get the win. I'm really looking forward to this card. We have a great main event. Thiago Santos taking on Glover Teixeira, so you're going to want to keep locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt. As we always say, let's get into it. Straight up, this is my favorite fight on the card. It's not because the fighter on the right-hand side shares the same last name that we do, and happened upon our YouTube video where we didn't pick Brendan Allen to win one of his fights. We have Ian the Hurricane Heinisch taking on Brendan All-In Allen, and what's not to love about this fight? I mean, Ian Heinisch, when he went out and fought Gerald Mearshart, came out like Khalil Roundtree did when he went over to Tiger Muay Thai and became Bangkok ready. And Ian Heinisch looked like a totally different fighter, and he was on a 2-fight losing streak, former LFA champ. I mean, he lost that fight to Marcus Perez at one time, but after that, he was on a great run. And LFA middleweight champs and fighters in this fight, we have two of them, because Brendan Allen, your former LFA middleweight champ, and since coming into the UFC has looked amazing. I mean, he had the win over Moises Marietta, kept that title, Moses Marietta. Then he beat Aaron Jeffrey, huge Canadian prospect. Okay. Then he had a win over Kevin Holland, submitted him. He got cracked in that fight. Then he knocked out Tom Breeze, and then he beat Kyle Dawkins in a fight that was insane. Like, I don't think that fight gets enough credit, and I just want to say this. Kyle Dawkins lost that fight. He's got a fight coming up. They gave him a big step down in competition in my eyes. But this fight, holy smokes. Like, this is a great fight.
It's just wild that those are Brendan Allen's 3 first fights in the UFC. Like, you have a stoppage win over Kevin Holland, a guy who seems to fight every other weekend now, and people love him. And now he's beefing with the middleweight champion. So having a win over a guy like that is really important. And I kind of have these 3 guys in a bit of a triangle, because they all do a lot of things very similar. When you look at their games, they're all, they can all strike, they can all wrestle, they all have good jiu-jitsu. They don't have massive weaknesses. I would say Ian Heinisch, he's very unique in this way. He just kind of keeps a labored pace throughout a whole fight, where he'll be huffing and puffing in the first round, and you're like, wow, he's exhausted. But by the third round, his pace does stay the same. It's just kind of like a body language thing. You're like, wow, Ian Heinisch, they might need to stop it on the stool. And then he goes out and gets 7 takedowns and throws a crazy amount of volume the next round. I'm interested to see how his kind of new Muay Thai style will be incorporated into this fight, because if he comes out here just throwing kicks like crazy, Brendan Allen only needs to catch one and take you down, and then it's an absolute nightmare if that guy gets on top of you. And that's the great thing about this fight, too. No matter what stage this fight takes place at, even if Brendan Allen is on top of Ian Heinisch, it's not like Ian Heinisch is out of it. Even if Ian Heinisch is throwing leg kicks and, snapping his leg back every single time. Like, both guys are matched up so well with each other that no matter what happens in this fight, I think it's going to be a super competitive match.
And that's the thing. You look at Ian Heinisch's record, and is he a slouch on the ground? Well, he beat Cesar Ferreira and Antonio Carlos Jr. Now, I know Cesar Ferreira isn't in the UFC anymore, but still, those are 2 big wins over guys that are definitely dangerous on the ground. And for All-In Allen, I mean, what's not to love? The striking, maybe, but his ground game's so good. And listen, Kyle Dawkins really exposed some flaws. Maybe Ian Heinisch can try and pick up on those. And you might see it on the graphic that I have up in front, too. Ian Heinisch has spent time at Genesis Training Center, or Training Academy for this one. And I looked at the picture of some of the guys that he's been training with. Neil Magny's one of the main guys, but Grant Neal at that gym, Anthony Sugarfoot Adams that you saw in Contender Series, JJ Aldrich is there too, so there's that. But Ian Heinisch, decent quality camp as well. You might have recognized him from Factory X at a point. He spent time again in Thailand getting ready for his last fight for part of that camp, and came out and looked like a totally different fighter. So this fight should be really interesting. I mean, these guys have beef. This fight was supposed to happen earlier on in the year. Now Brendan Allen has to defend his training partner and coach's honor in Gerald Mearshart, not just for the Khamzat Chimaev loss, but that Ian Heinisch loss as well. So there's a lot of different things to like about this. The other thing too, Brendan Allen's super young. Like, he's at 18 pro fights, and he's going to step into the cage at 24 years, 10 months, 1 week, and 3 days old. How insane is that?
Very insane, because he's only 2 years older than me, and I haven't done any of that stuff. I'm really intrigued by this fight just to see what both guys get matched up with next, because middleweight is kind of in this new, not really revolution, but we are seeing a lot of new guys starting to make their way up near the top of the rankings. And for Ian Heinisch to fight a guy outside the top 15, we don't really see it a lot. We have a guy with a number next to their name actually fighting a guy outside of the rankings. It just tells you how serious he is about this fight. And Brendan Allen, the sky really is the limit. I mean, we've been critical of him in the past, but when you look at what he's been able to do lately and the string of fights he's been able to put together, yes, the Dawkins fight might be a little concerning depending on how you look at it, but to TKO Tom Breeze and to choke out Kevin Holland, like, I don't think people realize just how monumental of a task that is.
Yeah, and I mean, to back up, okay, Tom Breeze, a lot of people were critical on him. He had a hard time making the walk to the octagon. Did you watch his fight against KB Buller? People were really high on KB Buller, and he beat the brakes, to use a Matt Allen term. He beat the brakes off of KB Buller. When Tom Breeze is on, he's on. Maybe he was off in the Allen fight, but Allen looked great in that one. Let's not take too much away from him.
Exactly, and on the ground too, I will be really interested to see if Brendan Allen can take Ian Heinisch down, because Ian Heinisch has a weird kind of grappling defense. When he fights a pure jiu-jitsu guy and they try to take him down, it seems like his wrestling is enough to kind of get him over that hump and keep the fight on the feet. But when he fought Omari Akhmedov, you saw more of a traditional wrestler, and he was able to wear down on Ian Heinisch. No, he wasn't able to really hold him down and control him for any real period of time, but you could tell that labored pace, I guess, will get to him. He's a really good fighter going forwards, but if you can force him backwards, it's really uncomfortable for him, because if you're a really powerful striker and a wrestler, you're not used to going backwards. It's a very uncomfortable feeling. So if Brendan Allen can start to string together strikes, he has a really good jab. He can work his way in with that. I do like his takedowns from the clinch, but this fight is 100% based on how good is the takedown defense of Ian Heinisch and how good is the cardio of Brendan Allen. Because if Brendan Allen can keep up with Ian Heinisch and really threaten with takedowns constantly, and if he's able to get on top for maybe a round, really hurt Ian Heinisch, threaten with submissions, but in another round, Ian Heinisch is lighting him up on the feet. Like, it's so dynamic throughout every aspect. That's what makes this fight so hard to pick.
Again, yeah, like, we've seen this fight from Ian Heinisch. We've seen him face fighters somewhat similar to this, and he's gotten taken down, but he's gotten back up. He's rallied in some of them. He's lost some of them, too. So if we have a look at the odds, they're pick'em odds. I mean, all the way across the board. They opened at pick'em odds. The line shifted for Brendan Allen, I guess, really early on. People were putting some money on Allen to the tune of, he was at a minus 170 at one point. Now it's come back up, and a lot of people are high on Ian Heinisch at this point. If we have a look at the Tapology picks, 771, 78% going Brendan Allen, 67% saying he's going to get the win by decision. Again, I see it much more closely, and this is one of the tougher fights for me to pick because, A, it's a pop and popcorn fight for me. I'm not putting any cheddar down on this one. I'm just going to enjoy it for what it's worth because it is such a tough call. If I have to make a pick, like I said, I've seen Ian Heinisch in these type of fights before. He's won some and he's lost some. And for me, Brendan Allen is on such an upward trajectory to this point. It's hard not to side with Brendan Allen. It is a tough fight to try and go with. I can see a path of victory for both guys. I'm kind of spinning my wheels here, but I will go with Brendan Allen, just due to the fact that if he gets it to the mat quickly in that first round, you got to get it done. Because if he doesn't, I think as the fight moves on, like you said, Ian Heinisch is going to pick up steam. So maybe if Ian Heinisch isn't totally compromised at the end of the first round, maybe I will live bet, but I'm going Brendan Allen here.
So I was going to pick Brendan Allen, but he's not going to win this. The cardio and the leg kicks of Ian Heinisch are going to be too much for Brendan Allen, I believe, because you have to deal with, A, the constant pressure of Ian Heinisch, but if your body and your legs start to give out on you and you're not getting those takedowns, Antonio Carlos Jr. had Ian Heinisch's back and he couldn't finish him. I don't think Brendan Allen's at that level in jiu-jitsu. Like, Antonio Carlos Jr., here's a good example. Tim Boach, maybe not on that level, but you look at least what he's able to do on the ground to some of these guys and the way he cuts through most guys' guard and gets into full mount, takes their back like it's nothing. The fact that Ian Heinisch was able to just completely Grammy roll his way out of the majority of his takedown attempts and get back up to his feet, I think those fights have kind of made him ready for this fight against Brendan Allen. If Brendan Allen wins, the sky's the limit, and I'll never pick against him again. We have similar hair, and we have the same last name, but I think Ian Heinisch can be able to get this one done by decision. This is my fight of the night, though.
Matt, I'm going with Brendan Allen. You're going with Ian Heinisch. This should be a great fight. Sit back and enjoy it, and also sit back and check out the playlist with Fight Night Picks. Hey, we've got a great main event. Go over to Teixeira taking on a really tough out in Thiago Santos. Just keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt, as we always say.
Let's get into it.
really interesting fight. At 135 pounds, we have Raoni Barcelos stepping in on short notice, replacing Jack Shore, Wales' own, taking on the warrior Khalid Taha. And Matt, a lot of people, big fans of Khalid Taha. It's been a minute since his fight against Bruno Silva, and this is where it gets a little contentious because I have it up there as his record being 13-2 with 1 no contest. That fight against Bruno Silva, some USADA issues. It was a win for Taha, but was it, or was it a no contest? So for me, I've got it as 13-2 with 1 no contest. You might see it elsewhere, 14-2. And if things change throughout the week and we get a definitive, it is a 14-2, I'll change it. But representing Germany, he's got the Lebanese flag behind him. It's pretty cool stuff. And a lot of people really firmly in the corner of Khalid Taha. And what's not to like? I mean, so far in the UFC, a winning record, 2-1 wins over Boston Solomon where he knocked him out. Sean West, where you at, bud? And a win over Bruno Silva, like I said, on a huge card, UFC 243, where he submitted him in that fight. I mean, Khalid Taha, good wrestling, good counter-striking, and good jiu-jitsu as well. You've seen that on the regional scene. This guy can really get it done all over the place, training out of Arena Dortmund over in Germany. And on the left-hand side, Raoni Barcelos, Matt. I mean, former RFA featherweight champ. This guy had some really big wins in his time with that promotion. And I mean, really, the one loss to Mark Dickman back in 2014 has won every fight since. He's looked amazing. Wins over Bobby Moffett and Dan Moret on the regional scene. And in the UFC, wins over Kurt Hollabaugh, Chris Gutierrez. That was a finish. Carlos Joaquin, he was a minus 1,100 favorite. How insane is that?
Crazy.
And a decision win over Syed Nurmagomedov. A lot of people are high on him. Now, Barcelos, out of the fights that have fallen out, the big one, Cody Stamann, is last time out. He's supposed to fight him this spring. He's in on short notice against Khalid Taha. And I mean, Raoni Barcelos is a decent-sized favorite. We'll get into that. Coming in on such short notice, I think that stylistically, this is a really fun fight that'll probably fly under the radar. I know it's slated right now to be on the main card. I'm looking forward to it. What do you see out of this matchup here?
So Barcelos is a guy who I just wish was a little bit younger, because when you look at his skill set and you look at where he is in the division, you got to think to yourself, he's got to be more active. He's a guy who, if he was fighting once every 4 months, once every 5 months, he could make his way up that division quite fast.
He's my Claudio Silva. He's my insert Brazilian fighter that we don't see enough.
Santos.
Antonio Braga Nieto. Keep going.
So for me, Barcelos, yeah, I wish he was just a little bit younger. You look at what he's able to do. He can get it done on the ground, on the feet. He's got great wrestling. His jiu-jitsu's absurd. He's got really dynamic striking too. You look at all that and you're like, wow, that could be a champion one day. The issue though is he's 33. He's not 23. If he was 23 with his skill set, I'd be like, wow, this guy, he's going to go on to make a lot of moves. But at bantamweight, age can catch up to you really at any point. Father Time just comes, taps you on the shoulder, and that can be it. I don't believe this is going to be the fight that does it for him, but it is unfortunate that we have a guy at 33 who should be kind of in the prime of his career, who's not really able to get those top-level guys. Like, hopefully, if he can beat a Khalid Taha, if he's able to go out there and get another impressive finish win, he can kind of start getting people to talk about him, because bantamweight has the opposite problem that flyweight does. Flyweight right now, if you raise your hand, you can probably get a title shot. At bantamweight, it is such a talent-rich division, and it's so hard to separate yourself from the pack, because think about who's in the top 15, like Marlon, Corey Sandhagen, Aljo, Piotr Jan, Jose Aldo. Like, these are all phenomenal world-class fighters.
Frankie Edgar,
Pedro Munoz, Cody Garbrandt. Like, they're not only exciting fighters who bring really good skill sets, they're fighters who are fairly well-known, so it's really hard to kind of get yourself into that category, so that maybe one day, not saying Raoni Barcelos is going to be, headlining fight night cards, but he could maybe get into that co-main event slot, get on some more main cards to get his name out there, because I do like him going into the future. Khalid Taha is going to offer him a lot of really interesting questions, because Taha is one of the rare guys. I have him in the Alexandr Rakic category. He uses his athleticism really well in MMA. I know it's a weird comparison to make, but there's not a lot of guys. In basketball, for instance, James Harden says, I wish I was 6'11" so I could just dribble 3 times and dunk the ball. And it's kind of true. When you have all these athletic gifts, things come easier to you. Where if you're a guy like James Harden, yes, you don't play defense, but you're just so good at offense that it doesn't matter. Khalid Taha, he uses that physicality. He uses the fact that he normally is the bigger guy, and he normally is the better wrestler and grappler out of most guys who he faces, that he can kind of just sort of impose himself. There's kind of a pressure that he exerts throughout the fight.
Like in that Bruno Silva fight. Now, Bruno Silva, 125er, but still, you watch that fight, Khalid Taha didn't need to go ahead and take him down. He could just use the momentum of Bruno Silva moving towards him to get it onto the ground or down to the mat and submit him. I mean, Khalid Taha, like you said, I like that. A lot of physical gifts. Raoni Barcelos, maybe the more refined product. And we've seen that in those fights and in those quality of opponents. Now, again, Barcelos coming in on very short notice. And if you have a look at the odds, might be a bit of a surprise. Raoni Barcelos opened a minus 325 favorite. He's now minus 350. Khalid Taha opened a plus 250, now at a plus 270. And if you have a look over on best fight odds at a set 696 total votes, 93% going Barcelos, 51% saying he's going to get the win by submission. I think Raoni Barcelos gets the win. Don't get me wrong. I'm surprised that many people are on him on Tapology and he's that big of a favorite because, again, been out for quite a while, has some very impressive wins. I like his striking. I really like his takedown abilities and his own jiu-jitsu, and I think that's what's going to win it for Raoni Barcelos. But Khalid Taha isn't like a guy that I would totally write off in this fight.
100%. Barcelos should win. He is the favorite for a reason. I'm not going to put any money on this. It's not really justified because Taha, let's say he is able to defend some of those early takedown attempts, and his physicality is a really big part of this. And Barcelos does start to wear down as the fight goes on because he's carrying this extra weight over him as Taha's trying to clinch. There is a path for Taha to get the victory, but when you go with the bigger guy versus the more skilled guy, it's hard not to pick the more skilled guy every time. And the more skilled guy here is definitely Raoni Barcelos.
Matt, really looking forward to this fight. We both have Raoni Barcelos to get the win. Hey, great card coming up. Your co-main event, Andrei Arlovski taking on Tanner Boser, the Canadian, like us.
Wow.
And in the main event, Glover Teixeira and Thiago Santos. So you're going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt, as we always say.
Let's get into it.
Oh, hey there, bud. We got a big fight coming up between Andrei the Pitbull Arlovski, former UFC champ, and Tanner the Bulldozer Boser. Matt, it is Canadians fever. And by Canadians fever, I mean, who doesn't know about Tanner Boser to this point? This guy has been absolutely amazing in a UFC octagon, with the lone blemish being his fight against future champ Cyril Gahn, in a fight that was halfway competitive. And I mean, Matt, it's been a long time coming because Tanner Boser, toiling away with the ACBs and the M1 Globals of the world, he also fought for Unified. He was former heavyweight champ there back home in Alberta. This is a guy billed out of Bonnyville, Alberta, living and training in the Edmonton area. And holy smokes, I mean, real coming out party in his last couple of fights. 2020's really been Tanner Boser's year. And if you look at the fights, the knockout win over Felipe Lins was amazing. And then you get the classic. I mean, we're Canadians. I've got a Molson Canadian there. Let's do it. Oh, boy.
Wow. So I'll take over as Craig cracks a Molson Canadian with his teeth.
Oh.
This is such a fun fight for so many reasons because Tanner Boser, before that Cyril Gahn loss, was kind of known as more of a decision heavyweight. He wasn't going out there finishing people. He was more of a volume guy, and he wasn't having the most exciting fights. And after that Gahn loss, he went back to the factory, and he just rebuilt himself. He's one of the few heavyweights now that I can trust to go 3 rounds because with a lot of heavyweight fights, you know you're going to get that, we say 1 round of excitement, but let's be honest, it's much closer to about 2.5 minutes. But you have that 1 round of excitement, and if no one gets finished, you know, the pace will be labored. They're going to be fighting underwater pretty much for the next 2 rounds. Boser keeps that really nice pace, and that's actually going to be the really fun thing about this fight. Andrei Arlovski is 41 years old. He's got wicked output, though, and he's got good cardio. So this fight is going to be more similar to like a middleweight fight than I think it will be a heavyweight fight. And I think that's a really entertaining and interesting aspect.
And I don't think it's a controversial thing to say. And for Arlovski, he was taking on the best of the best for the longest time and continues to do so, really. And again, doesn't really have issues going 3 rounds, and he can keep his output up. And I mean, if you look at the losses from, let's go 2016 to 2017, Stipe, Overeem, Barnett, Ngannou, Tybura. Champ, title challenger, M1 Global champ, maybe future champ, Marcin Tybura.
I was going to say Marcin Tybura.
And then he beats Albini, he beats Struve, loses to Tuivasa, loses to Rakimov, has the no contest against Walt Harris, loses to Augusto Sakai, beats Ben Rothwell, loses to Rosenstrike, beats his teammate Felipe Lins, and now he's into this fight against Boser. So again, the former common opponent being Felipe Lins, and it's a recent fight that we can kind of go off of. Do you favor Arlovski because he has had a good decision win against Lins, or do you favor Tanner Boser that knocked out Lins and then finished Rafael Pessoa? I don't know. I mean, it's a tough one. But the one thing that I do know that I will kind of point out in this fight, the fact that we talk about how well-rounded Tanner Boser is, he's not one of those guys that has to go to decision. That was kind of always the calling card. He can finish a fight. He does one thing that a lot of heavyweights don't do. He can back up just slightly and whip that leg kick out and just continue to go to the well the entire fight. So I look at it here. I like the striking differential from Tanner Boser. I like the level of competition. I also like the fact that he has 100% takedown defense through all of his fights so far in the UFC. It's a limited sample size. But for Tanner Boser right now at heavyweight, the sky's the limit, and he's one of those fighters that, just like we had here recently with Joaquin Buckley, Buckley comes in on short notice and loses to Kevin Holland and then knocks the hell out of Impa Kasanganay to the tune, and I'm not joking, to the tune of a new Kanye West drop.
Nah. Sorry.
For Tanner Boser, you lose a fight against Cyril Gahn after you beat Daniel Spitz. It's a positive. It is. It's a positive to lose to a guy like that. It's a learning experience. And for Tanner Boser, he's this far into his pro career. He's a young guy. He has over 20 pro fights. You're just going to continue to get better. I think this is a great opportunity to go out there and get a win. Am I saying that Arlovski doesn't have a chance because we're both wearing Canadians jerseys and I'm drinking a Molson Canadian and Jeff Molson, who owns the Canadians, is a Molson? Maybe. I mean, the stars are kind of aligning here. But Andrei Arlovski certainly does have a shot. I just heavily favor Tanner Boser in this fight.
So, again, it's pretty obvious who we're going to pick in this, but at least let me set the plan as to why I think Tanner Boser is going to win. Andrei Arlovski has had a pretty good level of success fighting these guys who are, maybe they're not in the top 15 and they haven't been there for a long time, but guys who are trying to get to that level. He is very much the gatekeeper for the heavyweights now, and every now and then he'll kind of surprise you and beat a guy you didn't think he was able to, and then for the majority of the time, he'll just kind of Andrei Arlovski himself, because he realizes he doesn't have a great chin anymore, and I actually think that's one of the more respectful parts of his game, because he doesn't just go in there and try to throw hands like he did when he fought Travis Brown. It's like, okay, I throw, you throw, we're going to see who falls. And he's never had a great chin throughout his career, let's just be honest. He's been stopped quite a few times. But what he's been able to do is he can out-volume a lot of the guys who he deals with now. They throw a lot of bombs trying to knock him out because they know if they can just land that one big shot, then they can put Andrei Arlovski away. And a win over a former UFC champion, no matter what stage of their career that they are at, is still a really big thing to have on your resume. Tanner Boser doesn't really have that problem, though. Like, if you fight a Walt Harris or even an Augusto Sakai, I understand those are losses for Arlovski, although both being split decisions. Tanner Boser's not going to just try to throw power, and then after that first round, if he doesn't knock you out, he's going to have a labored pace, then you can just tee off on him. If he doesn't knock you out in the first round, that's fine. He's going to set up his combinations for the second one. And by the second round, the leg kick's going to be working. So then Arlovski, who really does use his footwork, and he doesn't use wasted footwork either. I do like what Arlovski's done in this stage of his career. I'm actually a big Arlovski fan because I like the fact that he'll throw his combination, he gets out of danger, and then he goes back in. He will readjust. He's not going to go out there and just start flatlining people anymore.
He's not like, and there's a good example at the start of this card, like Max Griffin. You watch Max Griffin fight, and he's kind of like a new style Ben Rothwell at 170. He's herky-jerky with his movement. He keeps his head out there, and he really throws hands. I like what you said there. I mean, Arlovski really does move in and out of danger well. Not to say that he doesn't get knocked out, but he does use that movement to his advantage rather than, hey, it's a part of my game and look out.
Exactly, and I don't think you don't need Francis Ngannou power to knock out Andrei Arlovski. Tanner Boser has more than enough power. He just doesn't also have all the detriments that come from having the crazy Francis Ngannou power. The fact that you can't go 15 hard minutes or, all those other detractors. So Tanner Boser, stylistically, this is just a perfect fight for him. It's a fight that's going to get him a lot more media because now he's the co-main event. He's going to get a lot more eyes on Canadian MMA, always a great thing. And he is one of the... It's been a while since there's been like an exciting Canadian, what feels like prospect in the UFC at least.
Hakeem
Dawodu's on his way, and there are a few names, but it does feel like Tanner Boser's one of the, I'll say, leading members of that group, who is, I'm not telling you, Tanner Boser's not beating Stipe Miocic for pretty much ever, let's just be honest. But he's going to beat Andrei Arlovski. I can't wait for this fight. I can't wait for more Tanner Boser. I'm just excited for this weekend.
All right, so Matt, let's talk about the odds here because we really should. Fair. Tanner Boser, the overwhelming favorite, open to minus 260. There's a couple blips on that radar, but it's really started to go the way of Boser. Minus 280 favorite at this point. For Andrei Arlovski, open up a plus 220. He's now at a plus 223. If we have a look at Tapology, out of 803 total votes, 88% going Boser, 75% saying he's going to win the fight by knockout. Matt, I'm not going to go with a prop on that one. I'm just going to go with Tanner Boser to get the win. I'm going to enjoy it. My nice Molson's not a sponsor.
Unless you want to be.
Have a nice sip of that and sit back and enjoy this fight. I think it's going to be a great one. We're both going with Le Canadien, Monsieur Tanner Boser to get the win. I'm looking forward to this. We got a great main event. Go over to Teixeira taking on Thiago Santos. So you're going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt, as we always say. Let's get into it. Really looking forward to our main event coming up this weekend. And hey, it's been an incredible card. So if you missed the rest of the videos in the playlist, make sure you check them out and help out the buys with a like and a sub. Hey, I hate to say it, but I have to, because this group is growing like wildfire. Wow. And we're on track to 20,000 subscribers by the end of the year. It would mean a lot to us if we could get there. So help us out. Please and thanks. Now let's get into this video, Matt, because Thiago Santos coming off his split decision loss in his title fight against Jon Jones. And hey, if you thought Dominic Reyes got close, this was the original I'm going to get close to Jon Jones fighter. And Thiago Santos, who was having success with 2 bad knees in that fight. And that's one thing that you definitely have to worry about going into this one. The fact that Thiago Santos has surgically repaired knees, and he's been off for quite some time. Now, he is taking on a 41-year-old Glover Teixeira. And if we're talking about former common opponents, for Thiago Santos, he finishes Anthony Smith. For Glover Teixeira, he also finished Anthony Smith in his last fight in impressive fashion, where Anthony Smith's corner, get out of there. I mean, that did not go well for those guys. But for Glover Teixeira, I mean, a vintage Glover type of performance in that one. He's on a tidy little win streak. His last loss was in his 5th to last fight against Beastin 25-8, Bellator's own Corey Anderson, who's got a fight this week against Melvin Manhoff. And I mean, you could be in the future and know how that fight ends. But hey, for Glover Teixeira, what's he good at, man? I mean, his boxing's crisp.
Absurd.
His ground game, one of the best in this light heavyweight division.
And I would compare Glover's ground game very much to a Luke Rockhold, where the second he gets on top of you, he must feel like 1,000 pounds. Because once he does get on top of his opponents, it's not as much that his wrestling's going to wow you, like he's a Daniel Cormier who can go from like, you know, a topside throw into an ankle pick. It's not that. His wrestling's quite simple. But once he does establish the top position, it's not Khabib-esque in the way that he gets his positions. But the second he's on top in the ground and pound that he's able to get from just weird angles too. I mean, the Anthony Smith fight is a really important fight to bring up for positives and negatives for Glover. We'll get into that in a sec. But Glover, once he did find his rhythm and once he was able to start to get his hands on Anthony a little bit at the boxing range, you saw once he was able to get the fight to the ground, Anthony Smith is a phenomenal grappler. He's a very credentialed black belt. Glover Teixeira, when he got into full mount, he was able to take his back, basically just transition from back mount to full mount and beat the brakes off Anthony Smith for 2 straight 10-8 rounds. And I do think that that's really important because Glover, you look at 41, you look at the age, you maybe think about some of the bad losses that he's had. His cardio is phenomenal. I don't know what the deal is with 40-year-olds being in great shape in the UFC all of a sudden, but it's no longer 2003. People can fight a lot later into their primes. Thiago Santos does a lot of things that Glover struggles with, and it's vice versa too. Craig and I were talking about this before we started filming, where you look at what Glover does well. It's that top pressure. He's got really good hands. He doesn't throw kicks, though. Well, what does Thiago Santos do? He can throw any kick.
Ask Jack Marshman.
Yeah, ask Jack Marshman, ask really anyone he's fought. Really imposing guy, even though he used to fight at 185. His wrestling is the thing that worries me, and not only because his wrestling defense isn't, you know, top tier. Now, he was able to defend a lot of the takedown attempts from Jon Jones, but if you go back and watch that fight, it's not like Jon Jones was trying to take him down for the sake of taking him down. He wasn't shooting power doubles, get deep in on them and seeing what he could do. That was very much a string contest on the outside. But Thiago Santos on 2 ACLs was still, or with 2 torn ACLs, was still able to go 25 minutes with Jon Jones. Kristaps Porzingis had 1 torn ACL, and he missed 20 months. So the fact that Thiago's coming back this soon does really worry me. Another basketball guy like Klay Thompson missed a whole year because of 1 ACL. And you're dealing with a guy who not only had that injury in one leg, he had it in both legs. And now he's just decided, hey, this is probably a great time to get into a title eliminator.
From personal experience in a totally different sport, I partially torn the majority of the ligaments in one of my knees. And I can tell you
Craig is Derrick Rose.
But just from experience, I can tell you that road to recovery is not easy. It really isn't. And I didn't have to have any surgery to repair them. It was a good 3 or 4 months before I could actually, you know, move my knee around. I'm 26 and fairly active. So just from that alone, I can tell you, yeah, sure I am. Fairly active in breaking down MMA fights. But apart from that, I can tell you just from my own experience, that was a really bad injury. I've broken my arm before, broken both bones in my forearm playing hockey.
I drank milk growing up.
Just to parlay that into a knee injury, that knee injury was substantially worse for me than it was breaking my arm at my wrist to boot. So to really put that into perspective, for Thiago Santos to come back from 2 major knee surgeries and even to push through the pain to fight in that fight, it's amazing to see that he's at this point. Now, I hate to be a Debbie Downer, personal experience aside. It really sucks that the UFC made the fight between Israel Adesanya and Jan Blachowicz.
Okay, I'm going to cut you off right now. No, it's not. I'm super excited for that fight because this is what's going to happen. Adesanya probably beats Blachowicz, spoiler alert, and then he fights John Jones.
That's probably what the promotion wants.
Well,
yeah,
I'm
exactly.
not sad about that. Listen, you want to give both guys their due, and Thiago Santos, you will not find a bigger fan of that man than your boy over here. I witnessed him wheel kick a person live, and that might be the coolest thing you can do in front of me. But Glover Teixeira is this weird kind of... I think Thiago Santos should beat Glover Teixeira. I think both guys on their best day, Thiago Santos is the better out of the two. I think he's the younger, he's the more explosive guy. And when we do see Glover fight these dynamic strikers, at least as of late, people forget, he beat Karl Roberson. Karl Roberson also elbowed him in the head 97 times.
Glory kickboxing's Karl Roberson.
Exactly. He was able to hurt Glover on the feet. You look at Cutelaba. He spinning back-fisted Glover and really had him hurt in that fight. But again, it's always Glover. It's withstand the punishment, kind of download my opponent's game plan, and then start to unload on them. I just don't know if really anyone can stand back and download the game plan of Thiago Santos before he can start teeing off on them. Because we see two versions of Thiago Santos. We see the version that fought Jimmy Manuel, who is just, okay, I'm going to throw punches, you're going to throw punches, we're going to have one of those wild kind of slobber knocker fights. And if you do get into a who has more firepower fight with Thiago Santos, you're not going to beat him because not only does he have the power in his hands, he has the power in his kicks too, and he's so dynamic with the two and switching it up. Glover is going to need to get this fight in boxing range immediately. I'll let you get to the votes here in a second. I do think the boxing of Glover is really important because if he stands at that kicking range with Thiago Santos, double ACL reconstruction or not, you don't throw kicks at all. I don't care how limited he might be in his movement, what version of Thiago Santos is. He's a better kicker than Glover Teixeira. And I do think if he is able to keep this fight at range early on, really batter that leg of Glover, I would go after the head less of Teixeira early than I would later on. I would really try to soften up the midsection, soften up those legs, and slow him down so that when he decides to kind of start to make his push, it's a lot more easy to deal with.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what kind of Thiago Santos we get because, I mean, if you go back to Dustin Poirier, he has a fight against Khabib, he comes out, he fights Dan Hooker. Did we see him throw a ton of kicks after having hip surgery? It wasn't as many.
He went to the body a lot.
He did, but it wasn't as many as we were used to seeing. We've seen a lot of fighters where they move on in their careers, they have different knee injuries, leg injuries, they come back, and you don't see a kick-heavy offense. So will Thiago Santos' game plan totally change up? Let's see what happens. But if we have a look at the votes, Matt, and we're normally going with Tapology votes, but hey, spoiler alert, with question mark kicks, we always go over our votes over at Fight Night Picks on Instagram. I can't stress it enough. So we put it out there at Fight Night Picks on Instagram. And you had 77% of the vote going with Thiago Santos to get the win here, 23% with Glover Teixeira. That was good for 227 votes for Santos to 69 for Glover Teixeira. And if we bring in the odds, Matt, Glover Teixeira right now, the underdog, open to plus 185. The money dropped on Teixeira quickly. It's come back up for Santos and Teixeira at a plus 187. Again, that on best fight odds. For Santos, open minus 221. He's now at a minus 233. So all signs pointing towards a Thiago Santos win. It's been a while since we've seen him in the octagon. To be specific, about a year and 3 months for Teixeira the last time out. That fight against Anthony Smith about 5 months ago. So he has fought in 2020, and he's on a 4-fight win streak. This is such a good fight, and it's a tough one to predict. And again, as far as motivations are concerned, you're lining up for a title contender spot. I would think the winner, maybe if you go out there in impressive fashion, get the win, you face the Adesanya Blachowicz winner. But again, if Adesanya wins that fight, you have to think it sets up a John Jones fight. So it gets a little murky there. I love this fight. I think it's a great matchup. Again, if you want to point to two marquee wins and losses for Thiago Santos, well, he's beaten Jan Blachowicz before, and he hasn't just beaten him, he's finished him. And for Glover Teixeira, I look at those 4 fights, and again, we're talking, he finishes Karl Roberson. All right, well, Roberson's a middleweight, but a great striker. He beats Cutelaba. He beats Krylov by split decision, and then he finishes, again, a former title challenger and a common opponent between these guys in Anthony Smith. That was such a statement win only 5 months ago. It's tough not to roll with Teixeira, at least give him, a bit of a look anyway.
It's true, and maybe I am putting too much stock into that win over Anthony Smith, and nothing against Anthony Smith, but it was Glover taking a lot of shots, being able to get over that hurdle, and then dominating someone else. So if you take their names out of it and just look at the fight for what it is, can he get past a similar storm if Thiago Santos was in that position? Probably not, but his success that he found against Anthony Smith, he'd be able to what he was able to do to Smith on the ground is not even comparable to what he'd be able to do to Santos on the ground. Because Anthony Smith defensively off his back is quite good. He can get back up to his feet. Santos doesn't have that ground game in his back pocket to really rely on. So Santos, he's kind of a more volatile version of Anthony Smith, where the things he does well, it's like, oh my God, like we have to avoid all of these. But there are significant holes in his game. It's just he's got that great equalizer, which is the power. Everything in my body says Glover Teixeira. It really does. Everyone probably figured it out by now. I love basketball, and ACLs terrify me. When guys get hurt, they sometimes come back and they're never the same. It's a little bit different. It's kind of like Tommy John now in baseball, where like it used to be a death sentence for your career, but now you just miss time and you come back and there's not really a drop-off. If anything, it's beneficial. With ACLs, you either get worse or you stay the same. There's nothing else. So best case scenario, we see a Thiago Santos at 36 with 2 ACL surgeries, with a year layoff. Like, there's a lot of question marks starting to get in my head about Thiago Santos. I'm going to pick Glover. It's an underdog pick. I'll probably put some money on it. But this is such a hard fight to predict just because it is. It's either one guy's going to knock out the other in probably the most violent fashion we've seen since that Buckley Kasanganai knockout, or Glover's just going to go out there and kind of be the tide. You know, there's nothing you can do to avoid it. It's going to come in eventually. He's going to take his lumps. He's going to eat some shots, but I do think Glover's going to be able to get the win. It might not be the most exciting thing for the division. I can't say I'm overly thrilled that we might be seeing an Israel Adesanya Glover Teixeira fight in the future. Who would have thought that would ever happen? But I'm going to say Glover gets it done by TKO ground and pound. I really think he's going to be able to do it. # one more run. I know Alistair Overeem's been using that, but Glover, get on board.
I mean, Glover Teixeira, the last time he fought for the title was in 2014. That's insane. When he fought John Jones, and it definitely didn't go his way in that one. Of course, we're talking about one of the greatest of all time. Now, the thing, Matt, that really is telling for me is the stats in terms of takedown accuracy and defense. Again, for Thiago Santos, 68% takedown defense. That's not bad. It really isn't. But Glover Teixeira will shoot, and shoot again if he needs to. Now, that can come to his detriment. We've seen that. I mean, you can go back and look at some of those losses. Corey Anderson, really good wrestler. It didn't work for Glover Teixeira in that fight. The fight against Alexandr Gustafsson, one of the best combinations I've ever seen in my entire life for Gustafsson to get the win. A guy that could never really get over the hump. Again, in terms of striking metrics, they're better for Santos. Some of the grappling metrics, better for Santos. He doesn't shoot for as many takedowns. He doesn't get as many takedowns. I'm going to go with old man consistency. Wow. And it's weird. And this is a fight that you said you might go for it. I'm leaving this one off on my card. Again, it's an old Molson Canadian pop and popcorn type of fight for me. I'm just going to enjoy it for what it's worth. But for me, I don't mind the older guy that's been more active and the guy that I know what I can get out of Glover Teixeira. I've seen it time and again. Against Nikita Krylov, you might not like some of the early fights that Krylov had coming back to the UFC, but in a fight like that, you beat him by split decision. All right, Nikita.
It wasn't a split decision, let's be honest. Glover won every round of that fight and he dominated it. It's a split decision, but only if you look at his record.
To beat Nikita Krylov, who is that good on the ground, now he does get beat by submission a lot, but he submits a lot of guys. To beat a guy like that and then have a bit of a run of dominance against... Again, you might be down on Ion Kutsalaba after the fight against Magomed Ankalaev, the second one that was booked 4 times. You might be down on Glover Teixeira because he beat Carl Roberson or Anthony Smith, who's on a bit of a downturn. But again, the ground game of Glover Teixeira, you can't sleep on it. I am going to almost reluctantly go with Glover Teixeira unless something wild happens this week because, again, we get the chance to use some hindsight on Saturday with Fight Night Picks *Kick. So
I will be here.
Matt's going to be here. Make sure you check that one out because Matt's going to be sticking around a lot more in the coming future. And this is a really interesting fight. So we're both going with Glover Teixeira to get the win in the main event. I'm just looking forward to this fight. We got a great card coming up, so make sure if you're checking out the individual videos, you check out the Wrestle playlist. If you hung on for the entirety of this in the one-time shot, congrats to you, and maybe check out the Fight Night Picks merch station down below. But we're really looking forward to this card. Both of us going with Teixeira. You're going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt, as we always say.
Let's get into it.